Okay, we are live. This is the Senate Transportation Committee, and we're just resuming again. And our item is talking about the motor vehicle franchise bill. As many of you know, we've been discussing for some time, trying to get some cooperation between the Alliance and the auto dealers. And I think we'll get an update from, I believe, Bob Cody is our first on the list this morning. Good morning, Bob.
Morning, Senator.
Morning. Nice jacket you got there. Somebody buy it for you or what?
You gotta rep the company once in a while.
Well, welcome this morning. And why don't you give us a little update of what's happening? I know we tried a couple of things, and we'll see what we can do and what we can't do. Okay,
Sure.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. For the record, I am Bob Cody, President of the Vermont Automotive Dealers Association, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all this morning. Per Chairman Mazza's letter requesting that VADA and the Alliance meet to discuss areas of disagreement and find a way to move forward, our board met immediately to begin that process and reached out to the Alliance with the proposal that eliminated what we believed were the two most controversial issues for the Alliance from the draft bill. The Alliance rejected that proposal and offered to meet, but put on the table all their issues, some of which were not in the draft bill Senator Mazza's letter told us to focus on, DR-22-0589. We pointed that out to the Alliance. The Alliance then went off to get clarification from Senator Perchlik and refused to meet until they did. VADA offered repeatedly to meet with the Alliance, but regrettably, we were never had the chance. Hopefully last night you all received a copy of VADA's letter, February 25th, to Senator Perchlik and Anthea Dexter Cooper from Marilyn Miller, outlining in more detail our efforts at negotiation and why no agreement was reached. The Alliance asked VADA for another study, but with appointed members. We just completed with DMV study this year at the committee's request. We've identified the issues from all sides. VADA doesn't believe another study will be productive or that committees will have time to take these issues up next year. I'm here to respectfully request that this committee consider advancing this week a significantly scaled back bill that contains the few issues that are in DR-22-0589 and that are already in place in other states. I can provide a draft bill for your consideration if that is something you will consider. I would also ask you hold firm to the two franchise changes that were made last year that take effect July 1st of this year, involving a ban on the retail sale of parts and subscriptions. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Senator Perchlik, would you like to jump in at this time? I know you've been involved along with others.
No, I did get the letters, but I didn't feel like I had authority to negotiate for the committee or anything. So waiting for this testimony and hearing from both the dealers, as we just heard from Mr. Cody, but I know the Alliance is here represented as well. So
okay, so
just leave it here.
Any questions from Mr. Cody before we turn it over to the Alliance? I don't see anybody. Okay. All right. We have Bridget Morris for the lobbyist for the Alliance.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for having me and members of the committee.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to see you all here this morning, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of you up in the State House in the near future. For the record, my name is Bridget Morris. I'm a lobbyist with Morris Government Affairs, and I'm here representing my client, the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. The automotive innovators wish to thank you all for your time and attention to the franchise laws governing the contracts between our manufacturers and the dealers as represented by VADA. We appreciate the committee's desire to find consensus around requested changes to the franchise laws, and therefore we appreciate the spirit of your letter directing us to do so. However, what was a struggle for the auto innovators was finding the correct starting point for these negotiations. As VADA pointed out to us early on in our correspondence, the directive from the committee letter was that the negotiations must be based on sections within DR 22-0589, draft 2.1, which was drafted by VEDA to include only their requests in line with the suggestion box directed by Act 63. The auto innovators also spent significant time and resources drafting their own requests for updates to the Vermont franchise laws, which have not been included in the committee's draft to date. Therefore, we are being asked to negotiate without a leg to stand on. If the starting point of the deliberations is solely the request from VEDA, then we have nowhere to go. Just to remind the committee, some of our asks included things like changes to the system of vehicle allocation, all of which was not up for discussion in the negotiations. We also had some proposed changes to areas within this current draft related to warranty payment calculations and facility renovations. However, since our language was not included in the draft, VEDA could argue that these could not be considered on the table for negotiation either. Some of our most important asks in the suggestion box, which Bob Cody already mentioned, were was to strike the language in Act 63 related to the manufacturer prohibition on the retail sale of parts and the offering of subscription services. So you may recall last year, House Commerce pushed back the enactment date of those provisions to July 1 of 2022 because they did not feel that the issue had been vetted thoroughly enough. I would argue that still remains the case. These prohibitions for manufacturers should be looked at for what they truly are, prohibitions on Vermont consumers. Consumers in neighboring states will still be able to access these services directly from manufacturers should they be offered in the future, but not Vermonters. We still don't truly understand the ramifications for Vermont consumers when these bans go into effect in 3 to 4 months. Last week, when it became clear from VEDA's correspondence that a fair negotiation would be unlikely, we began to promote the idea of a task force or a working group, which we would ask the committee to consider. We do believe that the outcome of a negotiation between our two parties would have big impacts on Vermont consumers. And we would ask you to consider giving consumers a seat at the table during these conversations as well. Given additional time and a broader starting point for negotiations, the automakers could commit to working with the dealers and any other third parties or consumer groups the committee sees fit to come back next year with a fairly negotiated piece of legislation. In addition, we would ask that the enactment date on the ban for parts and subscription services be repealed or pushed back pending the outcome of this report. Thank you for your consideration and your time this morning.
Questions? Bob, any comments at this point, or you want to hold off?
Thank you, Senator. No, I think, we understand where the alliance is coming from. We're just concerned about a couple of things that we've already got in place. And one thing that always concerns us is the alliance's position of fairness to the consumer. And I can tell you that from what we see in our dealerships, we see about 70% of the people that still buy from us that were loyal customers. And they like to have the safety blanket, so to speak, of a place to go to. So sometimes direct consumer isn't everything to everybody. So that's just my 2 cents about that.
How many, maybe the Alliance or someone, does this vary from state to state all over the country, or is it something that the Alliance has a general contract with everybody, or does it vary from state to state?
Mr. Chairman, I was told by our attorney, David Bright, who testified with you in the past, he's our franchise attorney, that he negotiates these in many other states, and I believe has worked with Rich Sox in the past on other states. And that these negotiations can take weeks to months, and oftentimes what they prefer, of course, would be to have something done prior to going into a legislative session,
Right.
just so that we're not pushed to this timeline.
Yes, Senator Ingalls.
So looking at the goals of the auto manufacturers and electrification of their fleets that they sell, it looks like within 20 years or less that they'll be all electrified. And I'm wondering, is your intent to phase the dealers out at that point in time because you can sell direct to consumer?
Senator Ingalls, I can't speak for all manufacturers, but I can reiterate what GM said on the record last time, which is that, no, that is not at all in their business plan, and that they do see it as a partnership in the long term.
What do they sell? What do they sell when they don't have any vehicles to sell? If all the manufacturers are selling direct to the consumer, what do these dealers do?
Well, to tell you, Senator Ingalls, I can't speak for the long-term strategy of each manufacturer, but I can say that that is, generally not the plan. And right now we're not selling directly. But, and that was one of our requests in Act 63, but that goes back to our problem last year with the Tesla bill, which was really bifurcating the market. We didn't actually want Tesla to be able to sell their vehicles directly, and we still oppose that. And we would wish that that would be repealed so that all manufacturers were operating under the same standards of the franchise law.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I don't know. I just want to go back and get clarity on that statement. My understanding at the time we took up the bill to allow a repair to be done in the state of Vermont. Our testimony at that point was that there was nothing in Vermont law that would prohibit the sale of those vehicles in Vermont. What the language we were asked to deal with is whether a repair shop could be established. So I just want to be clear what the conditions were, because it appears as though we gave something to that manufacturer that was something new, when my recollection is the law provided for that or allowed that to happen before we took any legislative action. Anybody's memory? Senator Perchlik, you?
Yeah, definitely. But we clarified it a bit in the bill, but that was the issue of the original purpose of the bill, is to allow the facility to be, the repair facility to be purchased, to be built. And to clarify, if they do that and they sell cars, that they need to be registered and be a dealer.
It was my hope that we could get some, consensus on both sides and resolve this issue, because we do know it's a franchise agreement, but on the other hand, negotiations always can lead to some compromises on both sides. But it sounds to me like it's didn't make much progress on the first round. And we're just looking for areas that we can go the second round that would be beneficial to both parties. So I don't know. Any comments at this time from any other member of the committee, or either
Well, maybe we need a response to the request for, I guess people are going to say, is it kicking the can down the road? On the other hand, we're very close to crossover and what we're able to do in a thoughtful way. So the suggestion about putting together a work group, is that, I'm just wondering what the response is. Maybe Mr. Cody's got a response, or people can say, it won't be productive, or we've already gone down that road. So
Yeah,
I'm just wondering if we could get a response to
tell us
that.
a little more about the work group. How would the work group be composed of? How would that work?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think our vision would be really us and VEDA, and then potentially some consumer groups. I don't know if that's VPIRG or someone from the Attorney General's office, or anyone else that the committee deems necessary to be there. Maybe somebody from the DMV as well, to just, ensure that the negotiations are neutral and yes, do have consumer interests in mind. And I can tell you, for our party, we do think that there is room for negotiation here on the franchise laws. It's just a matter of having the time and the breadth of discussions to get us there.
Mike Smith, are you with us from the Motor Vehicle Department? Deputy?
I am here.
Okay, anything you want to comment on at this time? I know we've been all talking here, trying to get things, any comments at this time from you?
We do not, but we'd be happy to participate in the working group.
Okay, okay. Let's go back to Bob Cody then. Bob, what do you think about the working group? Is that something that's you might think about, or is what?
Well, well, one thing I would like to say, Senator, is that our neighboring state, a lot of the issues that we have put forward, our neighboring state already has them, New Hampshire, in their franchise laws. So I'm sure the Auto Alliance knows that and probably participated in that negotiations. So I can't speak without, having gone to the board of this. But like you said, anything that has to do with negotiations, as long as they're productive, we just thought that it's been we put this down from last year to this year, and we were hoping to move forward. But basically, the stuff that's in the bill is already enacted in New Hampshire and has been for a while, and not just New Hampshire, but other states as well. So the manufacturers are well aware of this, and I can't speak to as well as maybe Richard Sox could, but yeah, I could go back to my people and with VADA and see if that's something they're willing to entertain.
Was New Hampshire done through the legislature, or was it done with? Do you know how it was put together?
Mr. Chairman, this is Richard Sox. It was done through the legislature in New Hampshire. A lot of the provisions that are being proposed in this legislation have also been adopted through the legislature of Massachusetts and in New York and a number of other states, depending on the provision. And it is very uncommon to use a working group to arrive at the proposed legislation.
Uncommon.
Uncommon. I've not been a part of such a working group.
Well, it's been interesting discussion here. Anybody else got anything to add this morning? If you want to, yes, go ahead, Jane.
Well, at some point, if we're going to take legislative action, we've got to address what we would include and give time to move it forward. And so maybe I don't know, this is, who's going to be around here next year? It's an election year, it's certainly. I guess at this point, with crossover 3 days away, I don't know, very time compressed for any further discussion or feel informed action. I guess the question becomes, DMV did not want to get involved and did the comment collections. I guess the question for us is whether we should have actually have the initiative taken by the legislature and have a small group make recommendations for legislation upon return. That's one other way of addressing it. If we don't feel that we have the time, or we have a commitment that this is something we take up very early on in the session, so that we have the time to give it the consideration that we need. And I think where we got, the list was quite long and it included everything. I think one of the questions ultimately is, out of the list, which ones would be the highest priority to help us sort of figure out what's a manageable legislative effort.
The House has no knowledge of this issue at all. Is that correct? No one has discussed it in the House.
I don't think
Well,
so.
they know about it. They know about it, but they haven't taken it up. They don't have a
So it's not going to be high on their priority list, I imagine. If it's if it was to get to them. I didn't know if they had some background knowledge of what was happening with this issue, but you're saying no at this time. No. Senator Chittenden?
I'm not opposed to spending more time on this. I would yield to the chair as to whether or not we have it. I guess my other concern that I don't think has been touched upon as much today, but certainly is relevant, is the domain jurisdiction. I'm just wondering, I promise I do my homework, but I am very new to franchise law. So before I can feel really comfortable with all of this, I'd want to see a lot more presentation on it. And then I'd be worried that we're just redundantly tapping into an arena that I thought was in economic development and general affairs, but maybe I'm wrong on that front. And you mentioned the Attorney General at some point, Chair Mazza. What was the?
Yes, I got a call from the Attorney General a week or two ago and said that they felt they had because it was a franchise agreement, they had no jurisdiction under this issue. So that's where it started, and so that's what we have to be very careful about. There's a franchise law naturally, and it's a franchise agreement. And so, what part do we play as legislators? That's the question. We have to divide that of how far we can go and what we want to do or don't want to do. So that's the word I got. And maybe if Anthea was here, maybe she could even get a little deeper into it. But that's what I was told. So I guess at this point we can discuss it with our staff lawyers and see where we stand. And, try to get back to you as soon as we can with an answer, one way or the other, what's happening. Unless someone else has some ideas at this point. Do I hear anything else from anyone?
Could I make one quick comment, Senator Mazza? This is Claire Buckley.
Yep, go right ahead.
Thank you. This has been a very interesting hearing. I did want to pick up a little bit on Senator Kitchell's point about next year. And, if we do a study, which VADA is not looking to do another study, we feel like we just did a study. And I know it wasn't appointed members, but everybody put their suggestions in the suggestion box, and, we've fleshed them out, and it was difficult. I think understandably, the legislature is dealing with a lot of really big, heavy issues. Housing and climate and all kinds of other issues. And it's been difficult to get airtime on this issue. So going back to Senator, Kitchell's comment about who's going to be here next year, and if we do a summer study, that another summer study, slightly different one, but another summer study, that there be a commitment to take it up. And, obviously there's other committees involved like House Commerce and Senate Economic Development. I mean, one of the key provisions that we had dealt with data privacy for consumers. And that goes into Senate Economic Development. So that was our concern, is we will definitely do whatever this committee wants us to do, but we want it to be a productive, and actually have it, if we're going to go down that road, to have the committees take it up next year. And we were concerned with all the other competing interests out there that might be difficult to do.
Claire, can you tell us, this would be helpful, what jurisdiction does the legislature have over the agreement, the franchise agreement? What is there a separation there? What can we do and what we can't do? I would like that clarification, because the Attorney General, like I said, I don't know if you checked with his office, that would be clear of what jurisdiction we have or what we can do, we can't do.
Well,
that would be my question, because I just want to, no sense of going down a road that is going to be challenged and it's going to say it's not constitutional or whatever it is. See, I'm trying to figure that out.
Right. Well, I mean, anything right now you have, in Title IX, you have the Motor Vehicle Manufacturers, Distributors and Dealers Franchise Practices Act, and pretty much every state in the entire country has one as well. And it's standard practice for state legislatures to legislate the basic standards between a manufacturer and a dealer. And that's the basis of the franchise law. And it's completely within the legislature's purview to make amendments to those laws. Some of them, might be transportation related. And it's just, I was talking about the jurisdiction of the committee. In terms of Title IX is typically in Senate Economic Development, much of it, because it's a consumer protection type of statute. But there's no question that the legislature has the ability to legislate on these issues, in my view.
But wouldn't that be dangerous if you signed a contract with the manufacturers and then we override that or change that? I don't know the contract that they signed. Wouldn't that be dangerous? We could, in other words, you're saying the legislature could say they can sell direct, or they could make that ruling also?
You can change the law. Oftentimes there might be some transitional provisions, but every time you amend the franchise law, you are amending the relationship between a dealer and a manufacturer. And this isn't only true with motor vehicles, it's true with farm equipment, it's true with beer distributors who have franchise agreements. So yes, the legislature can change the basic underpinnings of the law that the law sets as a floor.
So why would the Attorney General say we have to be careful on a franchise agreement? Why would the Attorney General say that to me?
Well, there are things that you would want to, that you would want to take into consideration, the Constitution and various, no question. But these laws are amended every year in various states around the country, and every state has this type of law. So it's very common to amend them.
Okay, well, I think we'll check with Anthea and see what's.
I think the other conversation we've got to have, because we've talked about it right along, and that is the Committee of Jurisdiction involvement.
Right.
And I think that we need to have a conversation with the Chair of Economic Development in terms of how we want to proceed. I think the issues have been laid out. The question is, what should be that legislative response, and who's committed to managing the further discussion once we finish up this session. And I think that one thing has been missing is a reading from our economic development folk that deal with contract law about putting this on the agenda for action.
That's a good point. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because franchise law, I mean, as Claire has pointed out, this is only one example. There are franchises all over the place, whether it be snowmobiles, whether it be beer, whether it be, fast food, et cetera. So the only reason we're discussing it, obviously, is because it relates to vehicles and therefore transportation. But I think we've got to address that comfort level about, are we the right place, and do we have the jurisdiction, and are we having conversations that are going to come up against a committee of jurisdiction and say we're not interested in pursuing it. And I think, in fairness to everybody, that's got to be clarified.
That's a good point. I think that's certainly has it's got to come to a head sooner or later, because we could do anything and then all of a sudden it's going to be challenged. It's the wrong committee. So. Okay. Anything else this morning on this issue?
Chair Mazza, Anthea Dexter Cooper did join the room here. She's in the room if you had a question or comment.
Oh, she's in the room. Okay. Anthea, did you have a chance to hear the conversation this morning and some of this issue?
So I am going to go sit in the witness seat, which is then going to be really awkward because there is no monitor over here. So I cannot see any of the people that I'm now talking to.
You heard,
Senator Chittenden.
Yeah, you heard some of the last issues here about jurisdiction and franchise, and how far down the road do we go with this issue? And those are some of the concerns. And I think Senator Kitchell touched on it to the last comment about does it boil down to, is it under our jurisdiction? Can we deal with franchise laws, or does it have to go to another committee? Or so any thoughts at this point?
Okay, so for the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper, Office of Legislative Counsel, and thank you, Senator Chittenden, for putting your computer there so I can see who I'm talking to. So I did listen to your testimony. I missed a little bit as I was heading down from my office. I think you're dealing with two issues here. One is the jurisdictions of the committees, and that is something that maybe Secretary Bloomer could weigh in on and give you some advice there. In terms of what the legislature has jurisdiction over when it comes to the relationships between the auto dealers and the auto manufacturers, you've heard from a number of the people that have testified earlier that there are the equivalent of auto dealer franchise practice acts in, my understanding is virtually every state, and they are routinely changed by the legislatures of those states, which are the entities that have the authority to change the laws in those states. When you are dealing with the relationships between these business entities and the contracts that they then have, the franchises that need to comply with the franchise acts in each of the states, there are potentially going to be issues related to the contracts clause, and that's going to be overarching, being as how the legislature cannot really, in all instances, go in and change the contracts that exist between these parties. There also could be issues related to the specifics of the different provisions that are being raised in the Franchise Practices Act and whether or not there is federal laws that also address them. I have not done research on contracts clause challenges related to changes to the Franchise Practice Acts in other states this session. I did look into it a bit last year, and there has been litigation related to it. I can refresh my research on this. It is certainly not something that I think I could do a even barely adequate job of before the end of the week. But that is something to sort of consider in the background whenever you're talking about changing the Franchise Practices Acts, whether it's the vehicle ones or other ones, is whether or not there's a contracts clause issue. But it is in statute, it is in Title IX, it is something that was created by the General Assembly, and this is the overarching legislation that the dealers and the manufacturers need to conduct their business in. And you do already have in the Franchise Practices Act things that say manufacturers can't sell directly to consumers if they have a dealer. That is something that the state has said, and that is something that is now binding the manufacturers that are doing business in the state through their dealers. And there are other things like that all throughout Chapter 108 and Title IX. So hopefully that provides a little bit of background, but I'm happy to do more research, whether it's in the next few days, with the caveat that it will not be sufficient, I don't think, or in a future biennium if you are taking this up.
Thank you. Any questions for Anthea? Okay, all right. Anything else?
My paranoid mind says, she's telling me that Senator Kitchell doesn't think I'm going to get reelected with a couple of her comments there, but.
You might get redistricted right out.
That's right, that's right.
You'll be an island in, Lake Champlain.
There you go. Yeah, take me. Okay, well, we've heard this morning, and we'll have to just think about it and give you an answer as soon as we can. It's the best we can tell you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Okay, Jeannie, I think we can take us off live, please.
Senator Mazza.
Yes.
I just wanted to pass on that Commissioner Manoli's father died Monday morning.
Yeah,
which is why okay,
yeah.
I didn't, when I spoke with her this morning, she said to make sure that you knew, and she was on the schedule and wasn't here, so I wanted to make sure you knew.
Yeah, Joe Flynn told me yesterday, so thank you very much. Yeah, I'll have to get a hold of her. Yes.